Hi there, I'm John McAdams, founder of the Big Game Hunting blog. And in this video, I'm going to do a detailed analysis of the new 6.8 Western cartridge and how it compares to the 6.5 PRC and 270 Winchester cartridges. Now, as you will learn here in a few minutes, the 6.8 Western is another very interesting cartridge that I absolutely think is worth considering for North American hunters these days. Now, Browning and Winchester raised a few eyebrows when they announced the 6.8 Western to the world in early 2021. Many people were understandably very skeptical of what the new cartridge offered to hunters that they couldn't get already with a more established cartridge. Now, the fact that they released the 6.8 Western in the middle of a global pandemic and a historically bad ammo shortage didn't help with perceptions either. Now, I admit that I was very skeptical at first as well, and I did not think the new caliber was really needed at the time. However, I eventually decided to take a look at the 6.8 Western in more detail and with an open mind, and I was pleasantly surprised with what I discovered. So, in this episode, I'm going to discuss the history as well as the strengths and weaknesses of the 6.8 Western in detail. I will also provide some information on how the 6.8 Western compares to the 6.5 PRC and the 270 Winchester cartridges to give you an idea of what sort of performance you can expect from the cartridge, and so you can decide if it fits your needs as a hunter. As usual, we will start with the history of the cartridge. Now, the story of the 6.8 Western really begins with the 270 Winchester. Formerly released by Winchester all the way back in 1925, the 270 Winchester offered hunters blazing fast velocities and extremely flat trajectories compared to other cartridges in use at the time. Designed by necking down a 30-06 case to use .277 caliber instead of .308 caliber bullets, the original 270 Winchester load shot a 130 grain bullet at approximately 3,140 feet per second. Originally released with the Winchester Model 54 rifle, the cartridge developed a very well-deserved reputation for effectiveness on thin-skinned game over the years. Now, the cartridge understandably developed a large and devoted following during the course of the 20th century, and the 270 caliber became linked to the Winchester brand. Well, Winchester decided to follow up on their long-running success with a new 270 caliber cartridge at the beginning of the 21st century. Winchester released the 270 Winchester Short Magnum, also known as the 270 WSM, in 2002. That cartridge also fired a .277 caliber bullet, but used a shorter and fatter case. This gave the 270 WSM two advantages over the 270. First, it had a significantly larger case capacity that could hold more powder and would fit in a short-action rifle instead of the longer standard or long-action rifles the 270 Winchester is used in. Now, indeed, the 270 WSM has an approximately 200 to 300 foot per second velocity advantage over the old 270 Winchester. This resulted in a flatter trajectory, more resistance to wind drift, and more retained energy at all ranges. However, while the 270 WSM was fairly commercially successful for Winchester, many felt like the cartridge didn't live up to its full potential. Looking back on things, the 270 WSM suffered from the same limitations as other short-action Magnum cartridges designed around that time, like the 7mm Remington short-action Ultra Magnum or the 7mm SAUM, in that it used a design focused solely on higher velocity and shorter cases instead of heavier and more aerodynamic bullets. Now, specifically, the 270 WSM used the same 1 and 10-inch rifling twist rate as the original 270. This twist rate worked extremely well for bullets in the 130 to 150 grain weight range, most popular with those two cartridges. Now, while those bullets are outstanding for many hunting applications, they don't quite offer the sort of extended range performance more and more hunters and shooters are looking for these days. Now, shooters and hunters have really started to place a much higher emphasis on long, heavy, and very aerodynamic projectiles in recent years, and this has occurred in tandem with the rise in popularity of long-range shooting. In response, the various ammunition manufacturers have worked to satisfy that demand with offerings using sleek, low-drag bullets. The Nosler AccuBond and the AccuBond Long Range, the Hornady ELDX, and the various Berger hunting bullets are all great examples of extremely aerodynamic hunting projectiles that have really taken off in recent years, especially in 6.5mm, 7mm, and 30 caliber. Now, unfortunately, those slower rifling twist rates used by the 270 Winchester and the 270 WSM held back development of those long, heavy, low-drag bullets in 277 caliber. For instance, there are several different hunting bullet options available in 6.5mm, 7mm, and 30 caliber with a G1 ballistic coefficient over 0.600, like the 143 grain ELDX in 6.5mm with a 0.625 BC, the 168 Berger VLD hunting in 7mm with a 0.618 BC, and the 210 grain AccuBond Long Range in 30 caliber with a 0.661 BC. Now, comparable bullets in 277 caliber include the 145 grain ELDX with a BC of 0.536, the 150 grain VLD hunting with a 0.518 BC, and the 150 grain AccuBond Long Range with a 0.591 BC. Now, yes, hunters using custom rifles with fast enough rifling twist rates can use some of the really heavy and extremely aerodynamic 277 caliber bullets that are sometimes available these days, like the 170 grain Berger Extreme Outer Limits, or the EOL, with a 0.662 BC. Now, those heavy bullets simply were not an option for hunters who don't hand load and who use factory production rifles, though. Now, that changed when Nosler rolled out their new 27 Nosler cartridge in 2020. Designed from the beginning to use the new 277 caliber 165 grain Nosler AccuBond Long Range with a 0.620 BC, 27 Nosler rifles used a faster 1 8.5 inch rifling twist rate, and that took the performance of the 277 caliber to the next level by allowing for the use of extremely high BC bullets in a 277 caliber cartridge. Now, Nosler cartridges are excellent performers that fire bullets with higher ballistic coefficients at very fast velocities, but they are still fairly niche offerings and are primarily available in custom rifle builds, with a handful of exceptions. Now, even so, this development with the 27 Nosler set things in motion for the next domino to fall. Now, that domino fell on 15 January 2021 when Browning and Winchester jointly announced the release of the new 6.8 Western cartridge. Also known as the 6.8 Winchester Western, the announcement of the new round took some by surprise. Now, instead of just revamping an older cartridge to use heavier bullets, designers at Winchester and Browning decided from the very beginning to build a purpose-built cartridge that will handily outperform the old 270 Winchester and 270 Winchester Short Mag. Now, here is what Winchester's lead designer for the 6.8 Western, Kyle Mazzanelli, had to say. "We wanted to get into the untapped potential of bullets above .264 caliber. We only wanted bullets with a G1 BC above .600, and our goal was to beat the 300 Winchester Magnum's 180 grain AccuBond energy delivery at 500 yards. So to that end, they borrowed a page out of the playbook used in other successful cartridge releases like the 6.5 PRC. Now, similar in appearance to the 270 WSM and the 6.5 PRC, the 6.8 Western has an overall length of 2.955 inches and uses a beltless case that is 2.02 inches long, 0.535 inches in diameter at the base, and has a 35-degree shoulder. Though the 270 WSM cartridge has an overall length of 2.86 inches and fits neatly into the traditional definition of a short-action cartridge, the 6.8 Western exceeds those standards by a hair with a maximum cartridge overall length of 2.955 inches. Now, even so, the 6.8 Western will feed reliably from short-action AICS pattern box magazines that are so common with modern rifles. In addition to lengthening the cartridge overall length of the 6.8 Western, designers at Winchester moved the cartridge shoulder back slightly and decreased the case length compared to the 270 WSM. Similar to what designers at Hornady did with the 300 PRC, this resulted in a little bit more space for the bullet outside the case, also known as head height. Now this facilitated the use of long, heavy for caliber bullets without requiring them to be seated so deeply into the case that they intrude into the powder column. Now these longer bullets also required a faster rifling twist for proper stabilization in flight. So they designed the 6.8 Western for use in rifles with a 1 7.5 inch or a 1 8 inch rifling twist rate. And 1 8 inches is the current SAMI standard for the 6.8 Western. Now the end result is a short and handy .277 caliber cartridge that delivers impressive ballistics that compare very favorably to some noted long-range cartridges. Typical 6.8 Western ballistics are a 165 grain bullet at 2,970 feet per second, or a 175 grain bullet at 2,835 feet per second with a 24-inch barrel. These loads use very aerodynamic bullets that retain lots of kinetic energy and deliver excellent extended range performance on deer and elk size game. Now, as a point of comparison, the 165 to 175 grain bullets most commonly used by the 6.8 Western are heavier than the 140 to 147 grain bullets common with the 6.5 Creedmoor and 6.5 PRC. They are also heavier than the 130 to 150 grain bullets most common with the 270 Winchester and the 270 WSM. And they are comparable to the heaviest 160 to 175 grain bullets used by the 7mm Remington Magnum. However, assuming similar bullet ogive profiles, the 6.8 Western bullets are a little bit more aerodynamic, have a higher sectional density, and can be fired at a higher velocity than those used by the 7mm Remington Magnum in typical factory loads. For instance, Nosler offers a 7mm Remington Magnum load firing a 168 grain Accubon long-range bullet with a .616 BC, a sectional density of .298, and a muzzle velocity of 2,880 feet per second. Winchester has an almost identical load for the 7mm Remington Magnum, firing the same 168 grain Accubon long range at 2,900 feet per second. Now compare those loads to Winchester 6.8 Western offering, firing a 165 grain Nosler Accubon long range with a .620 BC, a sectional density of .307, and a muzzle velocity of 2,970 feet per second. That works out to about 2 inches more bullet drop, about a ½ inch more wind deflection, and 71 fewer foot-pounds, or about 4% less energy remaining at 500 yards for the 7mm Remington Magnum. Now that is a very small edge to be sure, but it is an advantage for the 6.8 Western over the 7mm mag nonetheless. Now finally, the cartridge also accomplished Kyle Mazzanelli's stated goal of delivering more energy at 500 yards than Nosler's 300 Win Mag 180 grain Accubon loads, with 1,862 foot-pounds of energy remaining compared to 1,745. Now the 6.8 Western also has a slight edge in terms of trajectory. In this case, the 300 Win Mag has about 2 inches more bullet drop and about 3.5 inches more wind deflection at 500 yards, and it also has about 10% less free recoil energy than the 300 Win Mag. All right, so with all that being said, how does the 6.8 Western compare to the 6.5 PRC, which is one of the newest and hottest cartridges on the block, and the old 270 Winchester, which is still the standard by which most .277 caliber cartridges are judged by? So first, the 6.5 PRC uses .264 caliber bullets, while the 6.8 Western and the 270 use .277 caliber bullets. Additionally, they all use different bullet weights. The 6.5 PRC can use lighter 120, 127 grain, and 130 grain bullets, but it's most commonly used with 140, 143, and 147 grain bullets. The 270 Winchester most often uses bullets in the 110 to 150 grain range, with 130 and 150 grain bullets being the most common. Now the 6.8 Western can use the same lighter weight 130 and 150 grain bullets as the 270, and it can fire them quite a bit faster, but it is optimized for 165 grain, 170 grain, and 175 grain bullets. Now the 270 Winchester has the longest maximum overall length of 3.34 inches and the longest case length of 2.54 inches. The 6.8 Western and the 6.5 PRC have the same maximum overall lengths of 2.955 inches and case lengths of 2.02 inches and 2.03 inches respectively. Now this makes sense as the 270 Winchester is designed for use in standard or long action rifles, same as the 30-06, while the 6.5 PRC and the 6.8 Western are considered short action cartridges. Now the 270 Winchester has a .473 inch rim diameter, while the 6.5 PRC and 6.8 Western have larger .532 inch and .535 inch rim diameters. The 6.8 Western has the largest case capacity of the three, while the 6.5 PRC and the 270 Winchester have very similar case capacities, even though they use a dramatically different case design. Now all three cartridges have the same SAMI maximum pressure of 65,000 psi. Now those differences in the external dimensions of the three cartridges do translate into some interesting differences in their ballistic performance. Now this is apparent when you compare Winchester Expedition Big Game Long Range and Browning Long Range Pro Hunter Factory Ammo in the three cartridges. And so for the 6.5 PRC, we have them loaded with 142 grain Accubon Long Range with a .625 BC and a 130 grain Sierra Tipped Game Changer with a .510 BC. The 6.8 Western uses a 165 grain Accubon Long Range with a .620 BC and a 175 grain Sierra Tipped Game Changer with a .617 BC. And finally, in 270 Winchester, that cartridge uses a 150 grain Accubon Long Range with a .591 BC and a 140 grain Sierra Tipped Game Changer with a BC of .508. Now note that the Sierra Tipped Game Changer is sometimes referred to as the Sierra Tipped Game King bullet or the Sierra TGK. All right, so with between 2 and 6 inches less bullet drop than the 6.8 Western and about 4.5 inches less bullet drop than the 270 Winchester at 500 yards, the 6.5 PRC has the flattest trajectory of the bunch. Now the 6.8 Western has about 2.5 inches less bullet drop at 500 yards than the 270 Winchester with the Nosler bullet, but actually has about 1.5 inches more bullet drop with the Sierra bullet. However, the 6.8 Western has the edge over the other two in terms of kinetic energy at all ranges. The Nosler bullet used by the 6.5 PRC does have a slightly higher BC than the Nosler bullet used by the 6.8 Western, but the situation is reversed with the Sierra bullets. So the approximately 12% advantage the 6.8 Western has with kinetic energy at the muzzle drops a little bit to about 11% at 500 yards with the Nosler bullet, but about 10% advantage in muzzle energy turns into an approximately 22% advantage in kinetic energy with the Sierra bullet at 500 yards. Now both bullets used by the 6.8 Western are more aerodynamic than those used by the 270, especially the Sierra bullet. So the 6.8 Western has about a 15% advantage with muzzle energy and about a 19% advantage in kinetic energy over the 270 at 500 yards with the Nosler bullet, and about a 14% advantage in muzzle energy. That turns into about a 28% advantage in kinetic energy at 500 yards. The same general trends hold true with regards to wind deflection as well. The 6.5 PRC Accubon Long Range has the least wind deflection, followed by both 6.8 Western loads, the 270 Winchester Accubon and the 6.5 PRC Sierra, and finally the 270 Winchester Sierra. Just 0.4 inches separates the 6.5 PRC and 6.8 Western Nosler loads, and just 1.3 inches separates the 6.8 Western and the 270 Winchester Nosler loads. So once again, the 6.5 PRC and the 6.8 Western are extremely similar, with a slight edge towards the 6.5 PRC. Likewise, the 6.8 Western has a slightly larger, though still not gigantic, advantage over the 270 Winchester out to 500 yards. Now let's talk about recoil though. Interestingly, the 6.5 PRC and the 270 Winchester both have very similar amounts of free recoil energy when you compare the loads using the Nosler bullets. However, the 6.8 Western has quite a bit more than both of them. Specifically, we're looking at between 28 and 39% more free recoil energy for the 6.8 Western. While we're not talking about ridiculous amounts of recoil here, the 6.8 Western recoil has been described as quote-unquote stout or quote-unquote noticeable, depending on the exact person in question. Now for reference, it does have a bit less recoil than typical 300 Win Mag loads, and recoil very similar to, maybe a little bit more depending on the exact load, than the 7mm Remington Magnum. Now, this is the sort of recoil that many people can handle without a lot of trouble, especially when you're shooting a rifle that fits you well, it's got a good recoil pad, or is equipped with a muzzle brake or a suppressor. Even so, it is still worth mentioning that the 6.8 Western does kick quite a bit more than the 6.5 PRC or the old 270 Winchester. And don't underestimate the impact that recoil has on the ability of a person to shoot accurately either. Some people do handle recoil better than others, but all other things being equal, they will absolutely shoot more accurately with a milder recoiling cartridge. Now, there are a couple of other factors that are also worth discussing. So first, the 6.8 Western and the 270 Winchester fire larger diameter bullets than the 6.5 PRC. Specifically, the larger diameter .277 caliber bullets used by the 6.8 Western have about 10% more frontal surface area, also known as cross-sectional area, than the 6.5 PRC. All other things being equal, a bigger bullet will make a bigger hole, cause more tissue damage, and result in more blood loss. This is a definite, though not gigantic, advantage in favor of the 6.8 Western over the 6.5 PRC. Now, those new, heavy, and extremely aerodynamic .277 caliber bullets used by the 6.8 Western also have a relatively high sectional density. Sectional density is a measure of the ratio of the diameter of a projectile to its mass. All other things being equal, a heavier projectile of a given caliber will be longer and therefore have a higher sectional density and consequently penetrate deeper than projectiles with a lower mass and lower sectional density. 120 grain, 129 grain, 140 grain, and 143 grain .264 caliber bullets have sectional densities of .246, .264, .287, and .293. 130 grain, 150 grain, 165 grain, 170 grain, and 175 grain .277 caliber bullets have sectional densities of .242, .279, .307, .317, and .326 respectively. Now, as a point of comparison, 150 grain, 160 grain, and 175 grain .284 caliber bullets used by 7mm cartridges, like the 280 AI and the 7mm Magnum, have sectional densities of .248, .266, .283, and .310 respectively. Now, there is a little overlap there, but with the exception of the 175 grain 7mm bullets compared to the 165 grain .277 caliber bullets, those 165 to 175 grain .277 caliber bullets the 6.8 Western is optimized for have a definite edge in sectional density over the most common and heaviest 6.5mm and even most of the 7mm bullets. Now, especially when combined with the fact that the 6.8 Western carries more kinetic energy downrange than the 6.5 PRC, those heavier and larger diameter bullets with a higher sectional density are certainly helpful when hunting really big game. Now, what about accuracy? While external ballistics are extremely important, performance on paper doesn't mean a darn thing if you can't hit your target. Well, Winchester implemented some design principles with the 6.8 Western to help optimize accuracy. Now, specifically, they built the cartridge with a very tight freebore diameter. Freebore is the smooth portion of the rifle barrel closest to the cartridge. Now, having a more snug freebore diameter means there is less room for the bullet to yaw upon firing before engaging the rifling. This can also help enhance accuracy, especially with extremely long bullets. So the designers at Winchester built the 6.8 Western with a tight freebore diameter in a manner similar to what other designers did with the 6.5 Creedmoor and 6.5 PRC. Those cartridges each just have .0001 inches of clearance around the bullets when they're chambered. Compare that to .0003 inches with the 270 Winchester and .0016 inches with the 30-06. Now, in any case, the details will vary on the exact rifle, ammunition, and shooter in question. However, the 6.8 Western certainly has excellent potential for accuracy, right up there with the 6.5 PRC. All right, now finally, let's talk about availability of rifles and ammunition. Like I said earlier, Winchester raised a few eyebrows when they released the 6.8 Western in the middle of a nationwide and really worldwide shortage of ammo and firearms. More than a few hunters and shooters reacted to the announcement with anger and frustration that Winchester and Browning were both devoting resources to producing 6.8 Western rifles and ammo at the expense of other more popular cartridges that were in short supply. I admit that I initially felt that way as well. My opinion has changed a little bit since January of 2021 though. Now, since it is such a new cartridge, there is very little competition for 6.8 Western ammo and rifles at this instant. Indeed, the 6.8 Western is the only centerfire rifle cartridge I have personally had uninterrupted access to both rifles and ammunition for during the entirety of 2021. Now, my situation is not unique, and I'm actually aware of several cases of hunters purchasing rifles chambered in 6.8 Western, specifically because that was the only centerfire rifle cartridge they could get ammo for at the time. Now, availability likely varies from place to place, and I have no doubt there are areas where you can buy 6.8 Western ammo, but not rifles, and vice versa, and I'm sure there are also places where you can't get either one of those things for the 6.8 Western. Even so, it is still one of the more readily available centerfire rifle cartridges in the US at this time. This does make more sense now that I think about it though. I have no idea how much ammo Winchester and Browning have produced for the 6.8 Western in 2021 to this point. For the sake of argument though, let's just assume that they made 50,000 rounds of ammo, and that is just a wild guess. Unlike more widely adopted cartridges, the vast majority of that ammo is likely being purchased by people who actively intend to practice with and actually hunt with that ammo in the near future. The fact that the 6.8 Western is a more specialized cartridge also means that it is not something a casual or a brand new hunter is likely to purchase either, which does reduce demand for it somewhat. This is in contrast to a lot of other cartridges where people are buying more than normal to have on hand just in case. And the newer gun owners and hunters that have joined our community in the last year and a half as well are also much more likely to be buying cartridges like the 6.5 Creedmoor, 308, 30-06, etc. But it appears that Browning and Winchester probably have satisfied the 6.8 Western ammo needs of a larger number of hunters to this point with those 50,000 rounds of ammo than they would have by focusing that same production capacity on 270 Winchester or 30-06 ammo, for instance. There is no guarantee what the future may hold, but at least in the near term, the 6.8 Western actually does seem to have benefited from the ammo shortage. At least as of mid-September 2021, the 6.8 Western is still one of the most widely available centerfire rifle cartridges in the US. Now, compared to the 6.5 PRC and 270 Winchester, it is not even close. The 6.8 Western is a clear winner in terms of ammo availability at this instant. All right, so where do we stand overall with these three cartridges? The 6.8 Western fires larger and heavier bullets at a slightly lower velocity than the 6.5 PRC. The 6.5 PRC has a slight edge in recoil, trajectory, and wind drift, but the 6.8 Western has more kinetic energy at typical hunting ranges and is better for hunting bigger game. Both cartridges actually have extremely similar trajectories and similar amounts of wind drift. In fact, both are excellent performers in that category overall when compared to commonly used centerfire hunting cartridges for those who want to squeeze all the performance they can out of a cartridge. Now, of those two, the 6.8 Western does have more recoil though, and that is important to note. Now, however, the 6.8 Western combines the flat trajectory and great resistance to wind drift of the 6.5 PRC with heavier and larger diameter bullets that have noticeably more kinetic energy at typical hunting ranges. That might not matter too much when hunting deer or pronghorn, but I would definitely lean towards the 6.8 Western over the 6.5 PRC for bigger game like bear, elk, or moose. Now, between the 6.8 Western and the 270 Winchester, the 6.8 Western fires heavier and more aerodynamic 165 to 175 grain bullets at velocities comparable to the 270 Winchester with lighter 130 to 150 grain bullets. Therefore, the 6.8 Western has more recoil, but an edge with trajectory, wind drift, and kinetic energy. It is also better on bigger game and at longer range. The 6.8 Western has a definite ballistic advantage over the old 270 Winchester in terms of external ballistics, and the fact that it can use heavier and more aerodynamic bullets really catapults the 6.8 Western into the next level for work at extended range and or for hunting bigger game like elk and moose. That does come at the expense of more recoil though, and if we're being honest, not every hunter will need the extra capability of the 6.8 Western compared to the 270, but it does provide some great capabilities for those who want or need that extra performance. Now, like I mentioned earlier, there is a surprisingly good selection of factory-loaded 6.8 Western ammo these days. At this time, Browning and Winchester are the primary sources of 6.8 ammo, but it is one of the easiest to find centerfire rifle cartridges in the US as of late 2021. Now, almost all of this ammo is geared specifically towards hunters who want to take advantage of the long-range performance of the cartridge. Now, while we've only got a couple of options for ammo at this point, that selection will continue to improve if the cartridge takes off with the general hunting public in the next few years. So specifically at this instant, you got the Browning Long Range Pro Hunter line loaded with 175 grain Sierra Game Changer bullets, the Winchester Expedition Big Game Long Range line loaded with 165 grain Nosler AccuBond Long Range bullets, the Winchester Ballistic Silver Tip line loaded with 170 grain ballistic silver tip bullets, and Winchester's Extreme Point Copper Impact line loaded with 162 grain copper impact bullets. Those are the only loaded ammo options I'm aware of for the cartridge right now. But like I said, ammo selection is actually surprisingly good, especially online, and it isn't nearly as difficult to find 6.5 Western ammo right now as some other cartridges have been during the last year and a half. As far as rifles go, Browning and Winchester both rolled out the 6.5 Western in a number of different rifle models from the start. At this instant, 6.5 Western rifles include 7 different versions of the Browning X-Bolt, 14 different versions of the Winchester XPR, and 9 of the Winchester Model 70 bolt-action rifles. In particular, the Browning X-Bolt Western Hunter and the Browning X-Bolt Hell's Canyon Max Long Range are both fantastic factory rifles for those who want outstanding long-range capability in a hunting rifle. As is the case with ammo, I have been able to find Winchester and Browning 6.5 Western rifles without trouble at all after they started hitting shelves here in 2021. Alright, so here are my final thoughts on the cartridge. It is clear that the designers at Browning and Winchester put some serious energy into building a superb rifle cartridge with the 6.5 Western. The advantages offered by the 6.5 Western over the old 270 are more incremental than transformative, but the new cartridge does provide a noticeable benefit to hunters. This is especially true for those hunting out west for bigger game like elk, where distances can start to get pretty long. This rifle cartridge was designed specifically for hunters as opposed to competition shooters, and so it delivers in the areas most important to that group of people. So specifically, the cartridge is extremely flexible and offers an outstanding balance of a flat trajectory, great resistance to wind drift, and heavy hitting performance at long range without excessive recoil, muzzle blast, throat erosion, or extremely short barrel life. Oh, and it does all that while still fitting in a short action rifle. Now, I am not endorsing using the 6.5 Western for an extremely long-range shooting situation on a game animal at ridiculous range. However, I am saying that I think it ranks up there with the other great cartridges for hunting situations in open country, like the 7mm Remington Magnum and the 300 Win Mag. Now that said, the 6.5 Western is a very specialized cartridge that probably doesn't offer serious advantages to the average eastern whitetail hunter. If you never shoot beyond 200 yards, there is no need for you to purchase a 6.5 Western unless you just want to. However, a hunter looking for a good all-around cartridge for use on game ranging from deer and pronghorn up to elk and moose out west could absolutely make use of the advantages offered by the 6.5 Western cartridge though. Now, the fact that the 6.5 Western is one of the more widely available centerfire rifle cartridges in the US during the ongoing ammo shortage is also an advantage in favor of that cartridge. Like I said, I've been able to pretty consistently find ammo for the 6.5 Western throughout most of 2021, even at the worst of the shortage. And at this instant, I can find 3 different loads for it in stock, which is more than I can say for the majority of other rifle cartridges at this instant. Now, like I also mentioned, I do know of several instances of people that I've known who have bought new rifles in a particular cartridge, specifically because they could get ammo for it. This is one of those cases where I think doing that really makes sense, even though that is still a pretty extreme step in most cases. But if it's between doing that and not hunting, well, then I can absolutely understand why someone would do that. It's not a world-changing cartridge or something with magical capabilities, but I think the 6.5 Western is an excellent cartridge that largely performs as advertised. There's no guarantee what the future may hold, but if I were in the market for a new hunting rifle and I wanted something with outstanding all-around capability, especially at longer range, that I could actually purchase a good rifle and ammo for right now here in 2021, then I would be seriously considering getting a 6.5 Western. This is especially true if you are having a tough time finding ammo for other cartridges, like the 7mm Mag or the 300 Win Mag right now. Now, if you enjoyed this video, then please make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel right now. Just click that red subscribe button below to make sure you don't miss out on any of my new videos about hunting gear reviews, cartridge comparisons, and more. For more detailed information on popular hunting cartridges and what they're best suited for, click on the link in the description below or go to huntingguns101.com to get a free ebook I have written on the best hunting calibers. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to you guys. What do you think of the 6.8 Western? All things considered, do you think the cartridge provides enough benefits to make the switch? Or are you going to be sticking with something else in the meantime? Now, if you do plan on switching over to the 6.8 Western, what are you planning on hunting with it, and what ammo are you probably going to use? Let me know by leaving a comment on this video right now. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and good hunting.